Hi, I'm Phyllis from southernfrugal.com, and this is Mr. Bucky, my husband. And Mr. Bryson Hatfield wrote a message in on my little private message thing on YouTube and asked us to do a video on what we were doing when Hurricane Hugo hit. Now that would have been, what, 25 years ago? At least in 1989. And the reason we remember it so well is because it hit in South Carolina September 21st, 1989, which just happens to be Mr. Bucky's birthday. That's why we remember it so well. So we'll just start out by what happened that morning. Now, the hurricane hit during the night. I think it hit here 11 o'clock or so here in St. Matthews, but it hit the coast, of course, before that. But anyway, so we'll start out with what was happening that morning. Of course, we were watching the news. So what were you doing?
Well, at that time I was superintendent of schools here
Yeah.
in Calhoun County.
Yeah.
And that morning we had had a meeting down at Emergency Preparedness Headquarters and about Hurricane Hugo and what to do about it in order to be prepared for it. So we knew that we had some time. We didn't know how much time exactly, and we certainly didn't know where it was going to hit, but it was heading right straight for Charleston. So we had that meeting, and after the meeting, we determined that we were going to let school out at 12 o'clock that day, and that's what we did. And when we let school out at 12, we had to get the buses home. And the bus supervisor asked if I could help him get the buses home. And a couple of the other male teachers helped too.
No.
But there was one particular bus that was a problem.
No.
The girl who was a bus driver was having trouble on the bus with the students. And so I said, well, I'll follow that bus home. And so I did. And sure enough, she had trouble on the bus. And she had to stop the bus. And the first time she stopped the bus, she got out of the bus. She knew I was back there behind her. She got out of the bus and asked me to speak to the students. I got on the bus, and I certainly spoke to the students very harshly. And I reminded the students that we had a hurricane coming, and we needed to get them all home, and that they must behave. And I thought that would do it. But
did it do it?
No. She got back on the bus.
Were these teenagers on the bus?
Well, I can't remember exactly who was on the bus at that time. I think there were some younger students on the bus too.
Yeah.
But yes, there were some teenagers. They were the ones that were acting up and giving her the problem. And she was a relatively young driver. And so whenever it continued, she pulled off the side of the road. And this time, instead of asking me to speak to the students again, she decided that she was going to tell me I am not driving this bus any further.
Uh-oh.
So she was just going to, I don't know what she was going to do about just parking the side of the road or what, but I was prepared to drive the bus home if necessary. But I told her, in no uncertain terms, you will get back on that bus and you will drive those students home because we've got to get the students home. And so I threatened her with her job and everything else, but finally she did get back on the bus and we got the students home. But that was a rather trying experience in and of itself. So that was what I was doing during that part of the day. What were you doing?
What was I doing? Okay, so I was home here and had the TV on. I wasn't working that day. And I was actually making you a birthday cake.
Oh, yeah.
You don't even remember that?
No, I think I do.
You just
remember.
vaguely remember the birthday
I remember,
cake?
well, of course.
Yeah.
I remember. It might not have been quite vague, but I don't remember what kind it was. It was pound cake, wasn't it?
No.
It wasn't?
No,
Okay.
it was a layer cake. Anyway, I was making him a birthday cake because it was his birthday. And so Stephen called. He was at the Citadel that time. He was a senior. You want to go sit with Papa? The dog has to be in the videos. He likes being in the videos.
This
So
is
we yeah, Steely. And Pepe's laying down there, and we don't know where Wheeler is. He's back there asleep. Anyway, so I was making the cake, and I had the TV on. I wasn't watching, but I had the sound on so I could hear it in the kitchen. And so as it turned out, the Citadel were letting all the young men go home because we knew the hurricane was going to hit somewhere on the coast around Charleston. So Stephen had called and said, well, him and Ernie were both coming home. And so I went ahead, making the cake, listening. And by the way, what were you doing after you got the bus home? I don't remember you coming home.
I probably went by the school to make sure that everybody vacated the school,
yeah,
and we were prepared.
Because I don't remember you. I remember Stephen and Ernie coming home before you did.
Yeah,
you're probably doing paperwork at the office.
Oh, I had to do something. Well, I remember going back down to the office.
You went to the office, yeah. Anyway, so as it turned out, then Stephen and Ernie both came home. And of course, my daughter at that time was living in Goose Creek in a townhouse. There, her husband was at the Charleston Naval Base. He was on submarines, and so he come here. Don't mush his ears up, please. Can't mush his ears up because then I have to comb them out. Anyway, and they had Logan, our first grandchild, who was about 3.5 months old then. Yeah. So anyway, her husband, Lonnie, said that they were going to tough it out down in Charleston.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that got me upset to no end. So anyway, we hung up from talking on the phone. I was talking with my daughter, Renee. And so another hour or so went by, and I was listening to the news, and so I called her back. And my exact words to her were, okay, Renee, you can let Lonnie tough it out down there in Charleston, but you and the baby need to come here further inland. So that was, I was upset. I was. Just, if he thinks you can tough it out, go ahead, let him tough it out, but you come here.
And you were pretty adamant about it.
I sure was, and good thing too. Huh?
Yeah.
So anyway, we hung up, and about 20 minutes later, Renee called back, and she said, we're all going to come up there and stay, because they started listening to the news reports. So, because their townhouse was right in front of a tidal inlet. What do you call those? A tidal
basin.
Tidal basin. I mean, when you looked out her back door, you could see the reeds and all growing in that little creek area coming up there. So anyway, they decided to come. Well, it ended up taking them, about 3 or 4 hours to get here, because all the traffic was tied up on Interstate 26 coming from Charleston. Now, the emergency people didn't realize they needed to open up both sides of the 26 interstate. Remember that?
Right.
There was a big uproar about that, because it was just hour after hour. People were giving out of gas, and it was just terrible, because people were trying to come inland. So since then, they've changed that policy. Now, if there's a hurricane that would be going to, excuse me, I hit the camera. If there was a hurricane that was going to hit, both sides of Interstate 26 would be opened up one way coming in.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So anyway, everybody finally got here. Now, Mr. Bucky was not all that concerned, because he's thinking we're way inland here. We're almost in the middle of the state, aren't we?
Right, and I was still thinking about 115-mile-an-hour winds.
Off the coast, but it was off the coast.
Right, it was off the coast.
It wasn't here then. So,
right.
So anyway, we had everybody here, and we still had power, and there was no real wind. What we had was the trees were just. It was not really wind. It's like that eerie thing where the wind's going either way, and the trees are blowing this way a little bit, and then they blow that way a little bit, and something isn't right. You can feel it,
That's right.
know. And so anyway, we had everybody here, and we had supper, and we had the little birthday dinner, and I recall me fixing some of that peach sorbet, because I'd frozen a bunch of peaches earlier, and we were all liking that, watching TV, no big deal, right?
No big deal, except it was increasing in intensity.
The wind was picking up.
And the pressure was dropping, so.
Yeah. So anyway, we still had electricity, and by the way, in September, of course, it's hot here. You still have to have air conditioning, and it was very humid outside, as I recall. Very humid.
Sort of like tornado weather type.
Yeah, the way it gets just real weird feeling. So we had the, birthday dinner and the cake and all that. and everybody was here. And of course, it's always good to have your kids all home and everything. And so we were still watching the news, and everything seemed okay. We didn't really expect any big deal here, right?
No.
Just really didn't. Just didn't expect it. So I think it was about 11 o'clock that we all went to bed.
Right.
Because the winds had picked up.
Right.
And then the winds got worse.
Yeah, well, I wanted to mention about McClellanville.
Okay, yeah.
I wanted to
Where your
mention about
cousin
McClellanville
lives?
because, there was a couple of things going on in McClellanville. First of all, my cousin's husband at that time had a shrimp boat. So that was important because when the hurricane did hit, it just stacked up those boats on top of each other.
I remember seeing pictures of that on the news. They
Yeah.
were just stacked up on top of each
Now,
other.
it did it at Isle Pumps too in the marina, but it was
Yeah.
worse at McClellanville.
Yeah.
And I do remember that during that day, and of course they announced it on TV that night, that there was a shelter in McClellanville. A shelter where it was a shelter for about 500 to 1,000 people. Could use the gym.
Was it in the gym or the cafeteria?
Well, gym and cafeteria.
Uh-huh.
Lincoln High School over in McClellanville.
Yeah.
And that was going to be an evacuation area for the people in that area. Well, as it turned out, that was a very harrowing experience because that storm surge of 17 to 20 feet got into that school, and they had to stand on tables, and in fact, there was one account where they had to stand on a table on the stage in order to, and knocked out the ceiling tiles in order to breathe and to stay above the water because of the storm surge. So that was a very harrowing experience, but thank God nobody was hurt.
Nobody died.
Nobody died.
All right, so I want to get back to that night. So we all went to bed, and Mr. Bucky just went sound asleep, totally sound asleep. He ain't knowing nothing about no hurricane, right?
That's right.
Just don't know nothing.
That's right.
He's sound asleep, snoring away over there.
Slept through it.
Yeah, the winds started picking up. And then finally, I started hearing this train coming through town, because we've got the railroad cut right through the middle of our little town, and trains come through all the time, blow their whistle and everything. And I could hear a train coming through, and I didn't hear no whistle, but I could hear the train coming through. And then the train just kept coming through, and then it kept on, and then I realized, ooh, wait, this is not a train. And of course the winds had dramatically picked up, and so it blew some of the bricks off the top. We've got a real big chimney, or we had a real big chimney, because it's got 4 fireplaces that feed into it, and I heard those bricks hit the roof. And and by the way, the next day my neighbor came over bringing the bricks in a bag and said, "I think these bricks belong on your chimney." She did.
No, we didn't
Jack
find them all.
did. No, we didn't ever find them all. But anyway, so that night we had a little trouble sleeping, and finally it got better, I guess about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I fell asleep too. And so I went the next morning, I've got to tell this part. I went the next morning into the attic. Of course, our power was totally out at that point. So I went to the attic. I don't know what I thought I'd see. I guess I wanted to make sure the roof was still on the house. And we had one of those little turrets up there at that time, the little aluminum turrets. Right. And some of the kids' baseball and football trophies were in a box up there. And I looked up there and I saw one of the big trophies jammed up into the turret on the. And I came back down and I said, "Oh, y'all are not going to believe this. That thing sucked one of the little awards that the boys had all the way up into the turret up in the attic, because our attic is real steep. It's got a hemp roof. I think that's what you call it. and it was real steep up there. So
Yeah.
where I was standing looking up is probably a good, 14 feet maybe, I don't know, 10 feet, I don't know. And so I came back down announcing, that we had such winds that it sucked that up. And at that point, Stephen said, Mama, I went up there last night and put that in there to stop that turret from turning because it was making a real loud whistling sound. So he had actually put it up there. But so of course, when everybody got up, we had no electricity. Now I had cold water in both the washing machine and in the bathtub in case we couldn't get water. So we had plenty of water, but no electricity. So remember, you lit the grill.
I did.
And we cooked
Yeah.
bacon and eggs for everybody out on the grill
That's
that
right.
day. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And we had a big tree down in our yard.
Yeah. Why don't you tell them about that big tree?
Well,
it was
we
a
had-
pine tree.
Yeah, it was a
right?
big pine tree, and but the folks that were going around cutting trees because the roads were blocked. How about Dancer Street over here?
Yeah. Oh, and I got to tell this too. It actually hit in Cameron, which is the next town over from us. They're further east, and
Oh, yeah.
are they further south or east?
Well,
They're east.
Further east.
East
yeah,
from us,
southeast.
yeah. So they got it a little worse than we did. You're gonna have to get down, Pippi. Get down. Get down. I'm talking. It hit further. Hit worse in Cameron. And I'm not sure if this happened in Cameron or somewhere in our county. People were out cutting trees and cutting limbs. To just, you couldn't even go down the road. There were so many trees down everywhere, and certainly we had no power. So this man was cutting. It was a huge tree in his yard, and he was cutting it up in sections. And his wife was standing where the thing had been uprooted. And when he cut it with the chainsaw, it went back and killed her. That was the only death we
Yes.
had to do with Hugo.
That was
Wasn't that a
terrible.
tragedy that she was standing there? Because it was a humongous tree. They had a picture of that tree in the
Yeah.
paper, yeah. Anyway, that was the only death I think we had in this county to
I
do
believe
with
so.
Hugo. But then afterwards, we didn't get our power back. Hugo happened Thursday.
That's right.
And we didn't get our power back until late Saturday afternoon. Now, it did blow some. We have a tin roof on the garage in the back, and I remember it blew some of that. Remember, you and the boys were up on the roof, standing up there putting the tin back on the
Yeah,
roof.
we had to chase that down. It was
Yeah,
everywhere.
it was over in Jack's yard.
Yeah, it was everywhere.
Yeah, but so it didn't hit in Columbia that hard, but it did hit in Sumter. And then, of course, it went on up to Charlotte, and they had damage there.
Yeah.
Now, Sumter's a town, and even the outer lying areas of Sumter, they've got a lot of pine trees, a lot. And even in Orangeburg, they've got a lot of pine trees and all kinds of damage to do with trees falling, because pine trees don't have much of a root.
No roots.
They just fall right over, you know. But those people that came and helped, we got to tell that story. Wait a minute, I got a call.
Okay. We might have to do something with Pippi down here.
Anyway, the people that came by and they cut our tree, because we only had the one pine tree. Now, lucky for us, we had 10 pine trees in our yard. And what was it, about 2 weeks to a month before Hugo hit, we had someone in here and got all our trees cut and the stumps ground, which was because it had been on the house had we not done it, because they were the great big super tall pine trees.
Right.
Yeah.
So, still got one.
Yeah, we still got one big one out here, but we don't think that'll fall right. It's huge.
No.
It's just huge. But anyway, so the people came by the house. They were, I think they said they were from Arkansas, and I heard a chainsaw going, and I went to the front door to see where it was coming from, and these people were out in their front yard sawing up that pine tree. And I went out there and I said, well, what are y'all doing? And they said, well, we're cutting the pine. I said, well, I didn't call you or anything, did I? I mean, I was really confused. And they said, oh no, we're volunteers. I think they were from Arkansas that drove up to help with the problem. We just stop wherever we see a problem and get the chainsaws out and start. And so they cut them up. Well, I was standing out there with them, and Mr. Bucky's bus supervisor rode by in his car. And of course, Mr. Bucky was back down at the district office. And
We didn't have school that day, but I think I'd gone in.
yeah, you'd gone in to see
Yeah.
what was what there because all the electricity was out.
Right.
And so he went down there and told Mr. Bucky that I was out with a chainsaw cutting that big pine tree up. And I know how to use a chainsaw,
said,
but I wouldn't have done that because the tree was too big. But yeah, they cut it all up for us, and then we didn't know their name or anything, just got in there. They were in trucks. Went on to the next house. Isn't that wonderful the way people did? Everybody pitched in and helped. Oh, I got to tell this. Of course, the power was out in Charleston a lot longer than it was out here. We didn't really lose anything in our freezer. But people in Charleston, and of course all the stores, no electricity at all.
Right, Sullivan's Island. Of course, it hit at Sullivan's Island.
Yeah, direct.
Sullivan's Island and Isle of Palms all out.
Yeah.
Folly Beach all
But
out.
remember, even in Somerville, they
Right.
didn't have electricity. So what they started doing, people started emptying their freezers and cooking their stuff out on grills. That was really something, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That everybody started doing that because their food was going to go bad. So they just got their grills out. They would be sitting out on the sidewalk. Anybody went by, got food. It was great, I thought, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
So that Sunday, now I'm doing most of the talking now. I remember better than you do, right?
Okay.
I remember
Well, you
about
gotta tell them about where it hit and all. I mean, it did do some damage down at the Battery and also on the Citadel campus.
Yeah, with all those live oak trees, it was terrible. The oak trees were terrible.
It really messed up Francis Marion Forest.
Yeah, it just flattened it.
Yeah.
And that's what got the worst of it was the Francis Marion National Forest. That got the worst of it, that back end of it. But I forgot what I was going to tell them now. Oh yeah, okay. We went to church. That our electricity came on late Saturday afternoon, and of course it had been hot, so everybody was miserable because the humidity was so high. The sun was out, but it was hot, and so the electricity came on, and that's when we got a look at how severe the damage was all along the coast. It was terrible. And so I got to tell this too. My boss and his wife were considering buying some property down in Myrtle Beach, right on the water. And they were, they'd been down to look at it and had pretty much decided to go ahead and buy it. I think it was like $500,000 they were going to have to pay for that. They were going to build a house there, right on the ocean. And that whole land just washed away. It was no more. And I remember Gladys telling me, boy, I'm glad we didn't get that property because it is no more. The whole thing was gone.
Yeah,
it just washed away. And the ocean actually, right where that land was, created an inland waterway right where that lot was. Isn't that something? Boy, they were glad they didn't do that. But anyway, we went to church that Sunday morning. And of course, we saw that it certainly wasn't as bad in the Columbia area, even as it was here in St. Matthews. I think that Sumter got the worst of it, and then it went on up to Charlotte. Yeah. And but anyway, we went. Mr. Bucky had to deliver school board packets because I think you had a board meeting that Monday.
I think we did.
That Monday, yeah. So we were delivering. I went with him because we'd just come home from church. And we went down to Cameron. One of the board members was down there, Bill. And so he was out back with his grill fixing chicken stew. And he gave us some of that was the best chicken stew I had ever tasted. Remember that? He put fried out fat back, real crisp, then crumbled it up and put it in the stew and then put potatoes in it. I don't know what else he put. He was a great cook. But anyway, we had some of that. I remember that well. I even remember what I wore. I had on a green kind of shirt and a black skirt that I'd worn to church that day. Is my memory better than yours?
Yeah, well, might have been.
What did you have on that day?
I don't remember.
I didn't think you did. Anyway, so the boys went back to Charleston.
They had to go back down there and clean up.
Yeah, they had to help with the cleanup because I don't think they lost any of those live oak trees on the campus what do they call that area in the middle of the quad?
The square, yeah, the quadrangle.
Where they do all the parades.
Yeah, the quadrangle.
And the marching and all. And I don't think any of the trees they actually lost. They just lost so much of the limbs off of the trees. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So anyway, that was the way it went with Hugo.
It did some damage in down at the battery now, down at the battery and stores downtown.
Yeah.
It was a huge hurricane. Really, it was the biggest hurricane that we've ever had in South Carolina.
Other women, didn't you have
Hurricane Hazel.
Hazel?
It was the only one that actually Hurricane Hazel kind of scraped inside, went in, but this one hit right just directly.
Yeah, it just came in. Boom.
Billions of dollars of damage.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know it when Hazel hit. Of course, I would have been 9 years old. We were in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
My dad worked in the shipyard up there, and I do remember it coming over, and of course school let out and all that, and we even the shipyard workers came home because it hit directly.
Yeah, but it didn't do near as much damage as Hugo.
No.
Even though it was a stronger hurricane, a little bit
I
stronger.
wonder why though.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. It was probably one thing. It didn't do any damage at all in large areas. I mean, maybe it was more in the rural areas. I don't know.
Well, of course, it came directly into the Hampton Roads area. We lived in Hampton, Newport News, Virginia area, and what I remember most was Daddy made us sit in the living room. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Mama was trying to educate us children on what was happening because we were afraid. The winds were terrible, and we were sitting in the living room, and the big tree, we used to call it the woodpecker tree because the woodpeckers would build little holes in the tree up there, and that tree hit between our house and the next door neighbors, and when it hit, it shook the whole house because it was a huge tree. And then I remember, they were trying to comfort us children, and I remember Mama saying, now the eye's going to come through, and when it does, it'll be real calm. And the sun came out. It did. The sun came out, and it was just peaceful and calm after all that wind, and then it started up again.
Yeah, in the eye, yeah.
Yeah, and the next time when that wind came around the backside, it was much worse than the first time, much worse. But anyway, so I remember both of those.
Yeah, well, Hazel did not hit directly. It kind of scraped the edge
Of South
Carolina.
Yeah.
It was on shore. And another thing too, it was 54, which would have meant that the damage would not have been nearly as extensive as it would have been in 89.
Why would that be?
As far as the dollar value.
Oh, yeah, because
Yeah.
there were a lot more buildings than there were in
Right, that's
1954.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Where were you in 54?
Well, I was still in school. I was in, I guess what, 10th grade.
Oh, you were in high school
Yeah, I was
still.
in high school.
You're a lot older than me, aren't you?
You like to tell that, don't you?
No, you're not that much older than me. Well, I was 9 years old, and you were in the 10th grade when
I think
Hazel
so,
hit.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, that's all we got. I don't know if y'all find that interesting or not, but it was good remembering back. And,
It was 135 mile an hour, category 4 when it hit. And we weren't expecting anything like that.
No, we really weren't. Yeah, and they certainly weren't prepared in McClellanville.
No, and remember that spawned several tornadoes on the way to Charlotte.
Yeah.
Did damage all the way up
Yeah.
there.
Anyway, all right, Bryson, I hope that's what you were talking about, to give you an account of what we were doing. That wasn't a real happy birthday for Mr. Bucky, but we had all the kids here, and everybody was safe. And I think, now, what about the roof? Did we have damage?
We had, I think, $500 worth of damage.
That was all we had on
Yeah.
the roof.
But I still enjoyed my birthday.
Did you?
Yeah. Even
But
though
you-
my mind, I was preoccupied, of course.
Yeah, well, you were thinking about the school district.
Yeah, I was a little leery about the damage that this hurricane would do to the various schools.
Yeah.
But fortunately, we didn't have that much damage to the schools.
I think that what we were hearing that night, like when I thought the train was coming through, I think that was probably a tornado because it was so loud.
Yeah.
It just didn't touch down, I think,
Right.
probably. So
Right.
we were quite lucky, really.
Right.
All right, so is that it?
I guess
Have you
that's
got
it.
anything else you'd like to tell them?
No, well, I've enjoyed keeping a little Steely company.
He likes to be on
Or he's kept
camera.
me company, I
If,
guess.
if he could get up on the counter when I'm cooking and be in the video, he would like that. He
And
would.
Pepe's been trying his best to get up.
Yeah. All right. All right, so that's it. We'll see y'all next time.